creating beyond calculation, beyond politics, and beyond the big two. Welcome, Silverliners, to the wonderful world of Wednesday Wham. I'm your host, Dean Zachary, and we're joined tonight, as always, by the crew known as, individually, Barb Kailberg, the Empress of the Inks, Rob Davis, the Paragon of Pencils. We have the Wizards of Wordplay with us tonight, Rory Boyle and Scott Wakefield. Hope you join us. Scott also functions as my co-host and often, sometimes, co-conspirator on my side. Not really, just a joke there. Everybody ready for tonight? Because we have a special guest with us.
Tonight we're roasting James Hannibal.
We are roasting.
Surprise! Lambasting him with questions.
Yes, indeed. James Hannibal, for those who don't know already, is a fantasy content creator, well known for not only Lightraiders Academy and its ancillary stories, but novels. I think Wolf Soldier is one of them, comes to mind. Dragon Raid, the gaming system.
Ooh.
And we're going to be talking to him tonight about inspiration for this material, but also the mechanics and the practical side of promotion and marketing and things we can learn from a successful creator. So just to get started, I want to set the stage by letting our guest discuss a little bit of the inspiration that started this storytelling. James, if you could start us out, just what made you want to write, and were there any particular fantasy novels that inspired you to become a writer of fantasy?
I wish I knew the name. So I've always wanted to be a creator, be a writer ever since I was a little kid. Like I was trying to, get a hold of my mom's typewriter when I was like 4 years old. But
those things are heavy.
Yeah,
they are. They're really heavy for a 4-year-old.
Horrible backspace.
Right.
But at some point in early elementary, I was in a library. My mom often took me to the library on weekends, and just kind of let me run wild. And there was this big old sort of coffee table size, picture book of these art pieces, and they were the one that really struck me was this fair. And so it was this art piece of this, I don't know, county fair, but it was all in this big, nice green field surrounded by forest. And there was the juggler, and the jester balancing this thing on his nose, and a baker, and all these really cool things. But there was at the edge of it, and I think this was the artist's intent, is there was a little boy in his pajamas watching all the fun take place. And so I think in my brain, I was the little boy watching all these different people and all their different stories. And I want to tell all their individual stories. And so I think that was the moment I really, really knew very early on that I wanted to be a creator. And that's the most, even though it was all pictures, it's one of the most inspirational books that I can think of. Obviously, I'm also inspired by, on the fantasy side, by Clancy and Tolkien, and I think Stephen R. Lawhead. It's been a long time since I picked those up. But yeah, absolutely.
What about, something that you haven't mentioned, which seems analogous to the Lightraiders universe, is the Chronicles of Narnia. Had you read that as a youth? Were you exposed?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I would tuck myself away in the house someplace, some cozy space where my parents would struggle to find me, but that was not the intent. It was just a nice isolated place, and I would go to Narnia with the kids and really enjoy that and be part of that world. Dawn Treader was my absolute favorite. The Magician's Nephew was my second favorite.
I was just going to say, which book is the first one?
That's a hotly debated issue.
Yeah, I know that's a hard one. To me, The Magician's Nephew is always first.
Yes.
So, although I've got a.
You can take Scott's spot. I mean, we can get rid of him, and you can join us.
There's a prequel to one of my spy series, and there's actually there was a small argument on is the prequel the first book, and technically, even though it came out as a prequel from Penguin, I had released it from a small publisher first, so it is truly the first. Happens 10 years before the rest of the series.
Okay, so spy novels as well as fantasy novels. Now, when you sit down to write, do you saturate yourself with the material first that inspired you, and then break it down as far as an outline form first, and then you fill out the outline? Or are you one of these people who can just channel it? You just sit down in front of the computer and it just comes to you page after page after. I see a lot of material there.
Oh my.
Oh, the into the mind.
Yeah.
Oh my
the
God.
maniacal mind of a writer.
That's fantastic.
Oh
He's
my.
created a sanctum sanctorum.
That's the current Lion Warrior board, and there are 2 more boards on the other side of the room.
Okay. So it's
I get very
detailed
on plot and character outlines, and then as I go, like I will finish a draft probably at the end of December of Lion Warrior, and then in the month before I have to turn it back into the publisher, I will go back, I will erase that entire board, I will completely redo that board, and based on the current draft, and then move some things around to make sure that the reader's really getting the roller coaster ride that they deserve, and that all the things are coming together as they should.
Okay, that makes sense. Does the gaming world come from the novel world of the prose fiction, or do they feed off each other? How exactly does that work? Like chicken and egg it for me. Which comes first?
Oh, the game world. Yeah, well, that's really interesting. So the game world came first because it was Dragon Raid, created in '84 by Dick Wolf. And it inspired, that's another thing that inspired me as a teen, obviously creating stories for myself, living in the world that Dick Wolf created in that discipleship adventure game. And then, when he was diagnosed with cancer and given a short time to live, he asked me to come in and take over and sort of passed everything on to me. We actually did a transfer of intellectual and property and all that. And so, Lightraiders is Dragon Raid, 37 years later.
Okay.
And so in between, the novels began. And so the novels were born out of Dragon Raid, and now the novels and all the lore that we're expanding for that into, in today's terms of what you expect from that kind of lore is now feeding the new Lightraiders game as our team creates it.
Okay. Give us just to set the stage for the environment for us. Give us sort of the TV guide, paragraph of, what is this fantasy world like? Give us just the breakdown of what the quest of your characters actually is.
Okay, so early in the history of the world, the dragons were part of the elder folk. They chose to betray their creator, and as you can see some analogous things here. And they gave up their previous forms and were corrupted into these monster dragons, and then they deceived mankind and tempted them with power. So now, years later, the rescuer came and brought a small group of followers with him to the South Peninsula of the land, and gave himself, created himself into a fountain of water, gave himself to save his followers. And then 3 days later, to separate them, to keep them from the dragons, in the short version, he rose himself up into this huge mountain range barrier and these storm mists that surround that peninsula. The Lightraiders are knights from the former Elderfolk fortress of Ras Telasar, who strike out into the Dragonlands to rescue the humans that are enslaved by them there.
Oh, it sounds so cool. It's again, it feels Narnia-esque for obvious reasons. The metaphorical similarities to our Christian traditions and so on, but brought into and inflected through the prism of a Tolkien-esque world that is obviously very well thought out. And do you imply? It sounds like you're almost implying this is our world long ago, a prehistoric almost version of our world, or is this a completely?
It's a completely different realm. So, and interestingly, when Dick Wolf created the world, obviously he was very inspired by Lewis. He, I think in the allegorical sense, because the world is much more allegorical than say Tolkien, but also inspired by Tolkien. But he had a sci-fi side to him. And so we've actually drawn down some of the sci-fi aspects of the world as we kind of created anew. But it is its own planet. It's got 2 moons, actually got 3 moons. Molunos, the dark moon, only comes out once a year. The night of the Scarlet Moon is a terrible night when babies are stolen from the villages of the Aladoth and made into Scarlet Moon sorcerers. That's a whole nother thing. That's the topic we're dealing with in the hopefully TV show that we're trying.
Nice.
Yeah.
Very nice.
Oh, I said too much. Wait.
That's very cool. Well, I don't want to dominate all the questions. I'm going to pass along to the Empress for a moment. Barb, did you have any questions? Barbara functions not only as a very creative person, but she's gifted with the fact that she has a very technical mind and an accounting mind, as well as a creative mind. So she's our CFO, as well as being an excellent inker and a co-creator and a writer. So I could go on and on about how great Barb is, but I'll just let Barb ask away. Anything comes to mind.
Were you afraid of falling into any of the stereotypical tropes when writing? Or how do you avoid becoming like a Lord of the Ring clone or something like that?
So in one of the struggles we had, so I love Dick and I love Dick's creation, but it was 1980s. It was 1984 in that innocence. And so the goblins were very Tolkien-esque goblins and the orcs were very Tolkien-esque orcs. And then they had the sci-fi thing where they actually were all the Telania, this world that was, it's now Dustan, but it was Eden again in the original game. And Eden again was like the Australia of that solar system. And like all the criminals landed on there in spaceships, and that the bad orcs came in a spaceship and the bad goblins came in a spaceship, and so other things. But then the spaceships were gone, and then we were back to like medieval fantasy. But
yeah, we have a running joke here where all dwarves have to carry axes. So
Yeah.
right. They're always carrying that.
I should have brought my axe. So it just appears from off screen.
So what do you do?
There's another one.
To not fall into that trope.
We had some really great folks that were stewards of the system throughout, and we all sort of agreed that what we wanted to do, we actually are inspired by Tolkien talks about the evil in his world can't create, it can only corrupt. And that's a truth from God's creation. Satan can't create, he can only corrupt. God's created world. And so that's what we were inspired by. So the creatures in our world are no longer those Tolkien-esque goblins and orcs. When we talk about a troll, you're actually talking about a rotted out tree. Dean is extremely familiar with this because I should have brought a picture to bring up. So Dean has brought this idea of these corrupted, rotted out nature becoming our trolls to life in his art. And he's done the same with the goblins have this fungal flesh. Goblins are all fungal based. Orcs are actually ore creatures. That's how we get orc together. And so they're gargoyle-esque creatures made from various. And so you don't want to run into a quicksilver orc, obviously, because they are dangerous. So taking that so from a very surface level, avoiding a trope, we created something new based on a biblical truth that Tolkien brought out in his own work.
So in essence, it's the scriptural foundation that helps keep it grounded and not becoming a copycat. If I remember correctly, Tolkien was a believer before Lewis. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah.
And he was more from the Catholic tradition, the Catholic faith, and then Lewis converted later and wrote some fantastic prose books that were simply philosophical books in Christianity.
Like Mere Christianity, if you want to get into to Lewis's brain on that. Yeah, absolutely.
Right. I am sharing some of my early rough designs. If you're okay,
cool, yes,
with showing some of these. Now these are the roughs, and I will, if you're okay with sharing some of the final inks, I can even share some of those with Barb, and she can do
all of that's cool. Absolutely.
And he also always waits till in the middle of the stream to get this stuff to me. So
of course,
doing it beforehand.
I know I'm the bad boy. I wait till the last minute on everything. But Barb's been very gracious in that her platform doesn't clash as much with StreamYard like mine does. Otherwise, I would load this stuff myself. Tell us about seemingly Earth-like creatures that you have here. You know, I designed some lions and wolves. Are they very much cousins to the ones we're familiar with?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's so I kind of rephrased it as another realm rather than another planet.
Okay.
And so that helps us just deal with the similarities to our worlds. I also find a lot of times in sci-fi, you have derivative creatures. And I didn't want to do that. So if we're going to have a lion, we're going to have a lion. If we're going to have a bear, we're going to have a bear. It also aids in when you're writing these novels, which is it's medieval fantasy set in a slightly different realm. That you have, and I really, what I don't want to end up is with the new Chihuahua wogs that we have on the new Tolkien show. Oh, did I show that? That's the cutest wog I've ever seen. But and that's a balance in writing the novels because I want to have our own trees, our own plants, some of our own names, but I want the reader, when they're reading it, to be able to visualize what I'm talking about. And so we give them things that are very, very close to things in our world. And then recently, there was a scene where they were talking about herbs for healing, for pain medication, things like that. And I always go back to the science in our world, and there's a really cool thing called goosefoot. I always look for the things that have those sort of almost, you expect Tolkien, Kingsfoil, you expect goosefoot to show up right next to it there. Sure. It's a weed. And so those are the things that I look for. Or the other thing about that makes it helpful for readers, they're descriptive words. So brambleberry, if I invent a fruit called brambleberry, you have an immediate picture of what a brambleberry is and where you find it.
Right. That's good that you're using words that we know and blending them like Kingsfoil and brambleberry. These things, they conjure an image without you having to overly explain. The other thing I wanted to comment on is when I asked you for really the summary, that was an excellent presentation because you didn't go into proper names at all. You kept it placeholder functional. You were describing knights and the worlds, and you weren't using the names of the character. I find it refreshing because a lot of world creators immediately go to their specific names. And
I did. I don't know if you saw me flinch when I said Ross Telesar, because that's the word for Lightraider Academy, and I should have just said Lightraider Academy.
Right. Well, but that's just an excellent way of presenting it, because we know, those of us who've been in the business for a while, and then even some of the newbies, understand that when you're at a convention and you're pitching, whether it's to a publisher or you're pitching to a prospective customer, you want to be able to get the concept across very quickly, and people's eyes glaze over when you go into specific. I mean, immediately it's just boom, you're out of it. At will, Barb, you can screen share, and we're going to let James comment on some of these. I was fortunate enough that James contacted me. I guess you saw my work on Facebook, and you'd seen both, my religious art, but also secular art. And what brought you to asking me to do the designs for the RPG? I've never done anything like that.
A phone call to James R. Brown. James R. Brown is my co-writer in the games, and he was a freelancer on the One Ring games from Cubicle 7. So his writing is really part of the Tolkien world officially. And he's a game design genius. So he's a rules design guy, but he's also a really good creator. And we were talking about internal art. How are we going to do this? The internal art for this thing. We have the external art is being done by Kirk DuPont, who's fantastic. The maps are being done by Graham Snow, who's also fantastic. So we really need some great internal art. And so I presented some. I did some research, presented some ideas, and And yes, there's this Dean Zachary guy, but he's way too good. There's no way we can afford him. And so James is like, you know what, we need to still ask and see where it goes. And
nothing
so
ventured,
we're
nothing gained. Yeah.
super grateful to have our top choice, our dream artist on doing the internal artwork for the Lightraiders new box set.
Oh, well, thank you.
So
Thank you. What are we looking at?
We're
here?
looking
Kind of
at.
guide us through.
So this is a tree troll. So I mentioned that tree troll earlier, and this is that idea of that rotted out tree that is animated by the dragons and their understanding of physics in that world that is obviously much deeper than the human understanding, because of essentially they're allegorically fallen angels, and so they have that deeper understanding of that part of their world, and so they're able to manipulate, and that's how they deceived mankind into betraying their creator in the pursuit of power. And so now that after they deceived mankind, they began they began corrupting creation into these monsters, and this is one of them. Tree trolls. They also all have some sort of scriptural basis. Orcs represent rage, goblins represent meanness and bullying, and just the kind of the enjoyment of seeing others in pain. Tree trolls represent a pursuit of power, and they draw humans to them. And we've also taken tree trolls to another level and are dealing in Bear Night, the second book, with the idea of corrupting yourself in order to be something of the world, corrupting what God created you to be. And so they have these bark hide followers that are humans that burn their own flesh to try to make it look like bark, and cut off fingers to make it look like twigs at the end of a branch there. And so this is one of those guys. He's one of those absolute meanies. And the spores, you can see the spores that Dean created coming out of his mouth. That's part of that infection in the way that they mesmerize and enslave their victims.
I love the octopus-like roots where he can move along.
So that was a key thing. You have ents. I'm like, how am I going to make? So we started to make the tree troll, and I went, well, you know what? This is a mean ent. So we wanted to.
I hope they talk faster.
Speed up.
Yes, they do. They wanted to separate them. We wanted to set them apart, and so the idea of the roots as tentacles and how they move across the ground came as a good way to make them not just different but also more evil.
There's so many things I could do about the tentacles, but we have to keep it PG.
Oh gosh,
that's how you know they're male.
They're extendable Reed Wolf soldier. They go through the ground, they snag your leg and pull you.
Oh my
I've
goodness!
already gotten this ticked off once.
I just had like thoughts of Miyazaki. Princess Mononoke.
Yeah,
all the black tendrily. Yeah.
Well, I was most of this was very well described by James as I sat down to design these, and so the description was pretty comprehensive. So I knew where he wanted to go, and sometimes it takes me 3 tries to get there, but he ended up with the one on the right. I think you have the inks, Barb. I'm not sure on this. Maybe the next one. I'm not sure, but what was fun about it?
There it is. Yeah.
Fun about it was that's the one that you guys chose, and I thought that was my favorite because it just looked so wicked. You could almost hear it screaming or howling.
I showed the roughs to my wife Cindy, and we were like, wow, he took this right out of your head and brought it to life on the page. So it's just fantastic.
Thank you. So as we move on to the next one. Oh, okay. This is one of the human characters. Talk about the initiate here, James.
Okay, so the Lightraider initiate. So this is the first. We're actually releasing this game initially in almost curriculum form. We did purpose design it for youth groups and homeschool moms to use the Bible curriculum, and so it is a role playing game. In this first round, as we go through the first set of stories, they're a little more directed because they all have sort of segmented Bible study points to make. I'm holding in my hand, I keep waving these. This is one of our scripture card decks, and everything is based on scripture, and it all comes back to that. And they actually use the scripture during the game. And so they'll have specific scriptures that they're looking for in the early story portions of the game, no matter which road they take. About every hour or so, there'll be a Bible study wrap up, and then they can close the session there or continue on depending on how you play. Later on, it's going to be we'll have more freeform stories that fill in. But so this isn't the first box set is an Initiate's Quest, and so we have the Lightraider Initiate just joining the Academy, and you can see this one is past those early stages where they're getting in the door, and she's been assigned her weapons, but she's got her trident, and she's got her net, which is one of my favorite weapons because you can sling that thing and those spikes can get people. You can just knock them across the face. Oh, yeah. But she's also wearing her mini kit, and so rather than these characters carrying around packs and bedrolls, and then like, okay, we're gonna have a battle now. Toss it down. Let's go. All right, grab your bedroll. We wanted things to be a little bit more fluid. And so we came up with the idea of these mini kit where like pretty much all they're carrying for the road is on them in small pouches, small bits distributed around their body. And then you see also they have no armor because their armor is spiritual armor that activates when they begin fighting these evil creatures that represent various aspects of sin.
Okay. And one challenge about the mini kit, I just sent one of the finished pieces to Barb, was the description was you wanted pouches, you wanted, and what came to my mind was a military tactical vest, right? So I started thinking about it, and in my mind I thought, well, these characters for all practical purposes are crusaders, so I tried to think of a way to use a cross-shaped design almost with the pouches, and I was hoping you'd go for that, so
yeah, no, it was great. I love the little subtle, if you don't have our logo, but so it's it's a different realm, and in our realm actually she's got, I think, the fountain symbol on her belt.
She does,
and it's a real subtle fountain symbol, but what would be the cross in their realm is the fountain, because that was how the rescuer gave his life to save his followers before he returned and raised up the mountains. And so we have the fountain and the flame are two parts of that story, and that's their crosses. But even on our logo, we find little subtle ways to work the cross in there. We actually have the 3 crosses of Calvary in our logo. They're just hidden as stars in the design.
Interesting. Yeah, I had fun with that. Oh yeah, There's
the really good cross, right? You can really see it well right on his chest in the mini kit.
Right. Yes. And tell us about the staff too there.
So we actually drew that from Wolf Soldier. And Dean actually had a different interpretation of it than I did. So these characters are not the characters from Wolf Soldier, but I drew the weapon because I wanted to bring it out. And so in Wolf Soldier, he's got this ram's horn staff, this crook. It's a shepherd's crook because the kid starts as a shepherd, and then he comes across he's guided to this crook that is also a weapon that will become his tool as he moves through the series. But I'm thinking a crook really needs to be reinforced if it's going to beat up these trolls and stone trolls and others. So I had a steel band going all the way down the shaft that's tight to the shaft and reinforced. And so Dean took that, and you've got this like that metal piece at the base of the ram's horn that you can see, like you would see at the hilt of a sword, and where you might see it roll up into a rapier. Instead, it's going down over the shaft in the spiral of steel, which I just absolutely adore. So when I first saw that, I went, "Oh, I wish I had written it that way." But now it's part of the lore because Dean put it in there, and I just think I would love to see a practical test of the practical application of battle with this thing, but it's a really cool weapon.
I have the advantage of being able to look at a larger size than you guys because it's on my, and then the details are just amazing.
Oh yeah, and he's got the tree on the clasp, which is really awesome too.
Right there.
So
and
James,
that's the symbol of the Academy.
You keep saying maybe I missed something. I'm sorry. I apologize. Mini kit. Is this the miniatures? Are these the models for the miniatures?
No, many, as in many kind of, like many more.
Okay.
So many. So it's their kit, but it's a mini kit.
Yeah. They're image pouches all over.
Just from
that Missouri accent.
You've got you just pull out your little figure right there, and then you've got your orc figure.
I challenge you to a duel.
We need to make that and put it in the store.
Yes. Yes.
Bring them to your tabletop games.
I did go look at your games here, and okay, so having grown up as a church kid, and having gone through many iterations of people trying to be clever and teach the Bible, and very often it's just really corny with the flannel boards and the that's been my life. This is awesome. This is totally awesome. And I have, in my experience, I have been able to make good friendships with people around the Dungeons and Dragons table, believers and non-believers. And that has opened the door really to have discussions about faith. And
it's a giant icebreaker.
Yeah, Rory's Catholic. I'm Protestant. I mean, we've got our ideas that we talk about, and it's a great
Dean's Orthodox. We're breathing with both.
You got it all, man.
We've got it all. So I think this is awesome. that's what I'm getting at here. Is awesome. So and I didn't want to jump too far at Dean. I didn't want to steal from you and your
no, go right ahead.
Steal it away.
I'm going to take it. How has this world development for the game gone? For me, even thinking about it, my brain explodes. Having all the permutations of how a game would work and every variable. I don't know. I don't even know. That's not even a question, really. But how have you?
No, I get what
process?
you're getting at. Yeah. So, James R. Brown is the real genius there, and he's got obviously a lot of experience in the mass market or the commercial game world, outside of just Christian games. He's also a pastor. So he's spent a long time cracking the nut of how do we do the freedom of movement thing from a role-playing game and still have a Bible study. So the original 1984 Dragon Raid, which captured my attention in the same way. I was a pastor's kid in Colorado Springs. I guinea pigged every new youth Bible program to come out of the Navigators and IBS and Focus or whoever was there. Focus wasn't there at the time, but the equivalents. And they were all various levels of either dry or hokey, and so Dragon Raid though put me in this fantasy world where I created a character and really captured my attention, and then you were using scripture, and so I helped. It taught me the application of scripture in the fantasy world that helped me understand the application of the real world. And so where was I going with that? Oh, so one of the things that was a struggle with the original system is that it really just started the game with a set of spiritual lessons and said, in these scenes, you can apply these spiritual lessons. And so you as the leader had this big old list at the beginning of the adventure guide, and with scriptures and spiritual lessons, and then you could bring them up on the fly. And then the application of the Bible verses was also equally sort of chaotic. And so you had greater autonomy, especially when you got past the first set to the Moonbridge raids, where it was just you move to a hex and there's a light description of what's there, and the storytelling was entirely on the adventure master at the table to make it up as they go. So that was much more freeform, but it still had sort of the chaotic application of scripture. So for us to do that and meet those variables also while creating a specific Bible study, that's a really hard nut to crack. And James has done a fantastic job of doing that.
Yeah, here we go. And there's a new image here. I believe this is a cave goblin. These are early designs. James, why don't you talk a little bit about what the directive was, and then the variations and why you chose the final to be what it was.
So we started with the idea that goblins are these fungal creatures. And in Wolf Soldier, the very first character I created for the new Lightraiders world, and which was drawing from the original Dragon Raid, was a set of goblins. So you get a the words just a prologue. You get a prologue. It's actually a prologue for the entire series. I'm reaching just now the scene where I wrap up and draw back to that prologue at the end of the trilogy years later here. But that prologue introduces to a set of goblins. And so they were something that needed to be recognizable from the original game while staying true to our new understanding of these creatures in the new game. And so this creature itself is really a bridge. But so we took that goblin shape and form, and we added into that fungal idea. So frost goblins are very lichen-like. These cave goblins are like cave mushrooms, and they have beneath this sort of sinewy mushroom flesh that's got the mushroom boils on it and things like that. They've got this kind of net-like brittle knit bone.
That's super genius.
That's so cool.
They're also from the game perspective. They're the mob you throw at them, and they just like swash through them with the axe, right? And so they also needed to be absolutely destroyable.
Just throwing the 2 cents in because I'm a science major, but with the mushrooms, they can talk to each other through mycorrhizal.
Oh wow,
nerd!
I know, nerd alert.
I knew that.
They found that mushrooms, like the underground ones, can be like acres big, and they've determined they have at least 15 distinct signals they can send to each other.
Yeah,
I saw this documentary called Star Trek Discovery, and they used that.
Is that the one with the whale?
Oh no, please stop. Vic says when it sent us Silverliners.
That's my favorite
Bobby
one.
Says,
the whale's
Bobby
a good
says,
one.
Hi, Lightraiders. So, hi, Bobby. Thanks for joining us.
Bobby, thank you
highlighters
for doing. Hey. So the reason we chose this guy is because he did the best job of creating that bridge, not just going back to the old goblin style, but also the new goblin with that big old mushroom head he's got, and just the way that his neck draws down into into his body, and so his clothes, everything about him just absolutely fits the bill and is perfect for this. I love also one of my favorite parts of him is his eyes. He's got the big eye. Right. Actually, I have the same thing because I just got a new prescription, so my left eye.
One eye going.
Yeah. He's got the one eye bigger than the other, and just aspects that I really, really loved about that.
They have to be yellow, please.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Bright
Yeah,
yellow.
they are yellow.
Yellowish
right there
orange.
when the first book they're yellow. I am not familiar, Bobby, with 40K.
Nor but he's saying that,
is that Warhammer
in 40K.
Yeah, it's Warhammer, isn't it?
Warhammer 40,000.
That does sound like Warhammer. Yeah,
sounds like
gotcha.
Warhammer,
So
yeah.
they're a fungal-based reproduction.
Yeah,
that's cool.
Yeah. This was really fun to do because I got to really go caricature on the expression, and the way you described it was just I knew it was gonna be fun to do these faces. I wanted to really go over the top with just these are mean little, probably the equivalent of early D&D kobolds.
Yeah.
But how would they taste braised in butter?
Ooh, with some onions.
No, you don't want to eat. These are the wrong kind. These are like death caps, right?
So, from a world building writing side that we've delved into, and there are feelings against and for world building, I'll channel my inner Roland, and how much of this, all the stuff that you're telling us, I love it. I love all that. Like, I love deep world building and having mountains of knowledge, and also knowing that 90% of it doesn't make it to the consumer. How much of all the stuff you're telling us is it going to be in the stats? Are we going to be able to read this somewhere? Will we know all this about their skeletal structure and all that sort of stuff?
In other words, are you asking, Scott, is there going to be a player's guide?
Something like that. Like, James, you have, unless you've got notes on the other side of your screen that we can't see, but you've got all this going on up here. Like you're just rattling off because.
Well, remember, this was this started from something that I played as a kid that I had a huge love for.
Yep.
And this is, I don't know if you can see that this is the original 1984 Light Raider handbook, and that's where you got all that information on the creatures.
Okay.
And so then we will indeed have and some of this image. Will likely appear in Dean's doing images for we've got Dean doing images for all the different books. We have a couple of adventure guides, the rule book and the Initiate's handbook. But the Initiate's handbook will have these descriptions, especially for the nerd kid that wants to, that memorizes all the stats, knows
I read the Iron Manual
rules
and
lawyer.
the Enterprise Technical Manual, so I like going down those rabbit holes.
So I led a game of original Dragon Raid with my kids and my nieces and nephews for a couple of years. And so we had those that are just, they just want to jump into the story and jump into the fray. And you had those that, this is their whoopee at night,
Yep.
They've got every Bible verse memorized. They've got every creature and all the ways to destroy it absolutely memorized.
Mm-hmm.
For the civilians here, a whoopee is
Speaking of creatures, this is an interesting one. Tell us a little bit about what we're seeing.
That's cool.
So Granogs are dragon administrators, and their physical form in itself is a deception. One of the deceptions of the dragon. So I think in the creatures that became the dragons originally, they wanted to corrupt nature into something that is as close as possible to the original warrior form of the elder folk, which were these tall winged warriors. But they also, they can't do that. And so the deception in the drag, or the rumor in the Dragonlands among the humans is that these are half human, half dragon, and they're not. But they are the dragon administrators. So they're these, 7-foot tall creatures with these big black claws, and they've got sorcerers' rings all down their rings and gilded cloaks and all that. And they are an intimidating presence that keep the humans in line in the cantons.
Now, tell us a little bit. You in the description and the directives you sent me, you mentioned runes a lot, and even sent me samples of the runes. Talk to us a little bit about the significance of runes in this world.
I love runes. I've got runes tattooed on my body, actually. So
Runes.
yes, tell us about runes.
Well, there's a couple of different purposes in our world for them. One, one of the ways that we needed to bring Bible verses into a realm that is not ours. That was a tough challenge to crack. In the game, you can do it. You understand that it's a Bible study game, so it's not as bad. But when you're writing it into a novel form, you've got to make it part of that realm. Hi, Joe. Joseph says he played the First Watch card game while camping with folks. Oh, nice. Cool. Real campfire. I hope the cards made it back. I really appreciate that. So Joseph's talking about the First Watch card deck that I showed you earlier, and the scriptures that are on this. When we put them into the stories, James and I have been building the Elder Tongue, which is a whole new language. And we have a living document that has all these words on it, but we didn't just create the language, we also created a written form. And so you have that. And then the runes in the story are all basically corrupted versions taken from that form. When you have the dark creature runes, they're going to be harder, more slash-like. With this guy, they're going to look a little bit more elegant because he's supposed to be this wealthy administrator. But the dragons is part of the deception of power in the Dragonlands. The way that they enslaved the humans there is the idea of power in runes. So all of these creatures will have runes carved on their bodies in different ways to show and perpetuate that deception of the dragons.
It's fascinating use of runes. What's next, Barb? What do we got? I know there's a couple more.
So do you have like an enclosed vision of this world already? Is there an end game to it? Or is it always open, like sandbox? There is no end to it?
It's more sandbox. At least there's centuries to go here in terms of that. We have an end game that we're dealing with in the trilogy in Lion Warrior. And I don't want to give away too much about how that turns out.
Sure.
Okay.
So you're thinking like expansion packs for it as well?
So the way we're starting with it really is like a rank structured curriculum. So they start as an initiate, they become a cadet stalwart, they go all the way through those ranks in the first box, and then the expansions will be the next cadet scout and knight veteran and on so forth till they get to guardian of the light. And honestly, that's about a 10 semester framework there, depending on how often they play. And then we will have more freeform stories that are, I mean, it's all map based, but more freeform map based will be more encounter based. So you as the adventure master, they can go into one sector and you can take from a list of encounters so that they can find Easter eggs from the story, no matter where they go throughout the land. And those will fit into different ranks for them, depending on, so that they're adapted to the different levels.
Is it a D20 setup?
It is a D10. So Dick Wolf, who created the game, from Game Science, still around today, make these precision dice with very precise edges. And Dick loved them because when you look, they're all acrylic, and when you look through the center, there's a star inside. And he incorporated that into the story. So there's a whole story behind the Starlots and how they came to be in the world. And so everything is D10 based. In the original Dragon Raid, it was actually D10 and D8. And the Adventure Master played the dark creatures by rolling a D8, which gave an inherent advantage to the players because it is Bible study based, and so that we actually do want to lean towards victory for the players so that they can get to the end of the story.
That was my next question. How do you handle death if a player dies? Somebody's had a real bad day.
So that is a real bad day. And Dick Wolf actually had created heaven scenes where they would go to paradise and there would be a short scene where they would play through. For us, we have a different way of dealing in the rule set of dealing with a player that's down. It's more like game over, and you have to start back. It's like more in a video game type way in how we deal with it in the new version. Dean, you probably want me to talk about the sprite that's up on the screen.
Yeah, please do. Talk to us a little bit about the sprite.
This is the last piece of artwork, just a FYI.
This is another one heavily influenced by Dean's advice and skill. I wish I had it. So we created a board game in between called Starlots, and that's a family board game also based in the world. And John Peter Meyering did the artwork for this. And in it, I don't have one on here, but in it is our original version idea of the sprites. The sprites were insect based, or are insect based, so they're corrupted insects. And so this creature is hiding other appendages because she's actually an evil insect that is going to sting you and use that poison to bring you under her enchantment. We don't use the enchantment kind of framework anymore, but we use infections and poisons and corruptions. And so you can see she's got a pretty powerful sting on the end of the finger there. These are corrupted forms that are supposed to look like the Dynapha, which are a worship form of the elder folk. So these angelic worshipers. And so the dragons, where they created the Lisrofo, the Granog you saw earlier, is the warrior class. These are what we would think of as like fairies, but they're the worshiper sort of class of angelic creatures. And so these are corrupted insects made to look like that and mimic that form.
You can see the remnants of the insect implication there with her antenna. But I think when the reference you sent me and so on, I went a little more anthropomorphic than insect, and I was a little concerned that you wouldn't go for it. Tell us why you decided to stick with this.
Well, I agree with what you said. So when you sent me this, because I had a more ugly creature in mind, you talked about and what she represents is distractions and deceptions that take you off course and lead you down bad paths. And so those things are not going to be obviously ugly. They're going to be beautiful and attractive and everything. So that's why I thought that was a correct analysis of where we were going this, and it couldn't be an ugly insect. It had to be exactly what you were saying.
Yeah, I wanted to have more I guess beguiling appearance.
That's the word I couldn't find. Good there.
Good word.
Yeah. Near occasions.
Writing that down.
Hey, Pops.
Hi, Pops.
Is looking in on us there. I sent you a couple of more.
Yep, I got them.
So
working on it here.
Yeah, no worries. There's some more monstrous creatures that I sent. One is The orcs are difficult because we all have our ideas of orcs based on Tolkien, of course. So I kind of, I took your description and tried to give it my own flavor, but I also wanted to nod to the traditional orc perception. So that's coming soon as well. We're also going to be seeing one of the giants I created for you, a couple of the giants. Actually.
I'm looking.
So it'll show up in a second here, but it's interesting. It had a sci-fi feel when it came to, especially the sand giant. There's the orc.
There's the orc, yeah. So you can get you can see his, so they have, a bit of a gargoyle, that hunched feel from our world is part of that gargoyle body structure. You can just see this guy, as Dean has drawn, about to sit down on the edge of a building and look out over the city with Spider-Man somewhere above him. But,
Dean, is that your last name on his head?
What's that?
Is that your last name on his helmet? I see a big Z there.
Oh, that's some runes.
But it does look like
that
signature that I've got down there.
It may be. I may have planted little signals, subtle imagery in there.
But you can see his ore-based elements, and if we had the graphic, the CG guy doing it, then he would yell, and you would see the runes flare up orange, and the joints flare up orange of the molten rock inside.
I see some Kirby influence there. That struck me as a Kirby creature.
Oh, thank you.
It's kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Give him a cigar.
Best sense, yeah.
And it's
we've got another one. What's next, Barb? What do you got? There's I think there should be a couple of giants coming up here. But what was great about it was you were extremely comprehensive, and at the same time I didn't feel restricted by your descriptions. And a lot of times a client will have an image in their head, and they're looking for you to read their mind. And what was refreshing about your response was that you seemed like, you were open to my interpretation as long as the elements that you described in what you sent me were present. Thankfully, you didn't revise them all. There were just little enhancements here and there. But the ones you did choose to revise, I was like, yeah, he's right about that. This is a better take on this. But just the mechanics of working with an artist, Scott, you've mentioned this before as well. As a writer who doesn't draw, talk to us a little about what's the most important thing for you when you give a directive to an artist, and we'll see if James.
Honest answers only.
Oh, there's the giant. There's the forest giant right there.
That's cool.
That's very cool.
So, are you saying what's the most important thing? Are you asking me, Dean?
Yeah, just in general, because you've mentioned in previous podcasts.
Sorry,
you have some issues.
So
some artists.
Steam Patriots is very. I'm real picky about the mechanicals. I want them to look really good.
Right.
And I mean Rory is too. And then we have historical figures. So we have actual references and of paintings and other
statues and
drawings and statues of people. Yeah. So I want to be picky about that because that's important. I don't want to give any leeway with that. So I like to give detailed instructions, very detailed, and I'll kind of front load it with I'm gonna be picky, and so there's some other stuff like that we leave it. He moves left to right, or he's in a hurry, or or his face is in anguish, something like that. Yeah. But when it's really important, I want to be very detailed. Yeah. So that wasn't a simple answer. I guess I don't have one thing, but it's. I try to spell it out as best I can.
Yeah.
What's this guy made out of?
Steam Patriots, are you bringing out American history?
Oh yeah,
yes.
we're a steampunk American Revolution.
Yeah, Rory and I.
All right. Yeah, I'm very, very intrigued by this whole thing.
Oh yeah, you get a
yeah,
free
it's a
copy
great
because
book.
you're awesome.
It's a
Yeah,
great
well,
book.
we can send you stuff.
And you're a veteran, so we love you even more.
So, James,
Thank you.
talk to us a little bit about what we're looking at here. This
guy's cool.
One of the
That
giants.
is awesome looking.
So the Giants also, I actually loved R.J. Watson did the original artwork for original Dragon Raid, and one of my favorite characters in there is this giant. He also killed many a Light Raider in the early days because you get into the Light Raider test, which is your very first adventure with your brand new character, and the next thing you know, you're coming around the corner and there's this just huge monster that's second only to the dragon and how much it can destroy a Light Raider party. But he's this big goofy guy. He just needs a big old hug. He's also trying to pawn alcohol off on you, and so it's a little bit of the don't do drugs, stay in school
friend.
1980s. And so we wanted to do a new take. On these creatures, and so again back to nature, and so the giants are a golem creature, a traditional golem, not a Lord of the Rings golem, clay, animated clay, and yeah. Can you see this guy doing that?
Yeah,
no, I can't. No.
So with the tree style antlers and he's got these glowing green eyes behind those these dark
it's almost
chasms in his head
Celtic
there.
Nordic looking.
Yep, I was going to say the North.
I think that I was very inspired by that kind of thought when we were coming up with this guy's design, and then he makes an appearance at the beginning of Bear Night, which comes out in February. So that was kind of fun.
Nice. No, this was fun to do. You had
not the art, but the actual character.
you had a very descriptive requirements for him, and it was just fun. And I immediately responded to that sort of golem idea of something that is inanimate being animated. It's the mindlessness of it is what I wanted to capture with that piece, sort of a mindless, destructive thing, almost like a troll.
He is, yeah, and he is too. He's the sand giant, who's part of one of the first adventures. In fact, he was part. If you play tested, I want to say you probably didn't picture the sand giant like this if you play tested the new stuff. So we had about 150 play testers. I hope some of them are watching. And so this is the sand giant from the Priest and His Giant Problem, or Giant Problem.
That's good.
I love it.
That's
and so giants in our world are that thing that you grab onto that you think is going to. And for me, the giant was trying to get to a New York Times bestseller. That just demands more and more of you, and so in this thing, it demands more and more of the priest in this desert valley. It's taking their bread, it's taking their water, and now it just wants their blood. Oh, Joseph, we'll get you a copy of the playtest.
Can I just marvel at this for a second?
All the feedback's being incorporated, but.
As a person who can't draw very well, Dean, the sand falling from its mouth is like drawing in negative space, and my brain can't comprehend how to do that.
The idea was, I was thinking really of the Rancor from Return of the Jedi.
Oh, yes. I can see that.
So this was what I was mentioning. I teased earlier in terms of this felt more sci-fi, and so I was a little surprised that this was one of the designs that James preferred, but I think in the end it works very well. I just pictured it the way he described it. If you're gonna do sand, and me, I'm adding atmosphere to everything. It's got to have debris, it's got to have rain, ice, sleet, snow, wind, leaves, trash.
He does like his.
You draw the post office a lot.
He does like his cheeses, debris.
Yeah, debris.
It's not just Gouda. It's great.
I love it. Oh wow, there's a double one there. Wow,
I can
wins
hardly believe. Oh, sorry.
Best fun of the podcast so far. debris.
So the giant is actually probably one of the most literal allegorical Bible based evil creatures.
I was going to ask about that too.
So it's James. I had to double check my verse here, but it's James 1:15. So when desire gives birth to sin, and sin, when it is full grown, gives birth to death. And so the giant is what you bring in the giant, and the more you feed that sin, the more it grows and takes over your life. And the people in we wanted to take that to a much deeper level, and so we did bring out a giant as a almost a cameo in Bear Night, and then we take it very much deeper into a very hard place in Lion Warrior, which won't come out until like 2024. So spoilers.
Spoilers. So, okay, you've got this comprehensive world. I don't want us to run out of time before we start talking about the nuts and bolts of marketing, getting the word out, promotional strategies, and so on. One of the challenges we face as an independent publisher, number one, we want to produce a quality product. Number two, we want to get it in front of as many people as possible. And we discuss quite often on this program the advantages of today versus the days in the 70s and 80s of gatekeepers, especially in the 90s during the comic book boom. When I first started working in the industry, the gatekeepers were very much connected to either Marvel or DC, sometimes Image, and you had to network through editors. They pretty much decided your fate. Thankfully, we are free from those limitations now in that we can reach our own marketplace. That being said, with the preponderance of noise that is propagated all through all sorts of social media, do you target your demo? Do you use the shotgun splatter effect? Do you have analytics to show you where to go? And do you have a pro guiding you through all this?
Yeah, so we really we're just beginning to sort of crack that nut. Hello, Brent.
Hello, Brent.
Got it. Is Kalis the name of the series?
Yes, it is.
What's the? I came in the middle of the conversation.
Does he owe you money?
Well, I'm just asking. I'm interrupting myself to ask you the question. I'm wondering if it's autobiographical.
Yes, it's just recently been declassified. So yeah,
that's good. That's so good.
That's good. That's so good.
All right. So marketing, the getting into that, it's very different. So like you said, with the gatekeepers in the novel writing world, editors and agents are the gatekeepers in traditional. Self-publishing has opened up some of those doors. It's also really cluttered the market.
Yes.
There's a lot of not great fiction out there. I mean, gatekeepers did have a purpose.
Sure.
Just like we can't all be pilots at an airline. We have well, actually right now you can. Honestly, we're so desperate, but there is an HR. I'm working 12 out of the last 13 days of December at the airline job, and I'm not that junior. But anyway, so the gatekeepers have a purpose, and once you get there, even then, there are certain things there are certain requirements, and so that was my giant that I chased in trying to get to the New York Times bestseller was. Trying to be part of Penguin and Simon and Schuster and such, and there were compromises that I would have had to make in order to do that I just wasn't willing to make. So without the support of a major top 5 publisher, how do you crack this nut? And I've done it all. I've done the social media. We've done the very, very early on Facebook ad marketing, pay-per-click ad marketing was extremely helpful. Right now, not so much, especially in specifically the Christian demographic, because they have taken away the demographic controls to do that because it's apparently evil. So I can't tell it to go out and send my stuff to my Christian product to Christians. So we have to try to work around that. It's not that great. So John Carroll is just come on with our team. And John and I have been working together on a number of things he's my best friend in the world, been together since college. And so he worked for a social media company that re-edited videos, viral type social media video, to maximize impact and clicks and watch time. And so we spent a ton of money on a video shoot where we did 24 social media videos with a team of kids here in Houston. And then we're slowly releasing those. In fact, like 2 days ago or a day and a half ago, we released our first big one, which is the Sword of the Spirit, where these kids are testing out different swords and a wooden waster and pool noodles, and they're knocking through stuff that are filled with this colored chalk run. Color run chalk, and they blaze through them on slow-mo and it explodes. It's beautiful video. Oh, thank you, Joseph. The sword video is very cool. And then we're going to have a wrap-up that's going to come up later that shows how that ties into the Sword of the Spirit. And so we're just now getting into that experiment of building that view time and seeing how it goes virally without doing boosting or pay-per-click ads, because it got to the point last January where that was a 1-for-1. If we spent $900 on pay-per-click ads, we would do $900 in sales.
Oh,
and at that point, the graphs merged, and it was no longer valuable.
No ROI.
I've been playing
no ROI.
I've been playing.
So now we're rethinking that. Yeah, but I have two things for y'all, especially with Steam Patriots. And that is homeschool conventions.
Mm-hmm. Ooh,
interesting.
Oh, I had two things. What was the other thing? Oh no, I have one thing for y'all.
Homeschool.
I'll remember the other thing in a second.
That's all right.
Homeschool conventions for Steam Patriots, they would eat that up. So last year we did 3 or 4 homeschool conventions as guests of Realm Makers Bookstore, which is a fantasy and science fiction bookstore. And the combined attendance at those was 30,000. So it's a growing market. It's grown 40% in the last 2 years. And it's continuing to grow. And so this year we're going to have our own 20-foot booth, and we're going to see how it goes in getting the word out. Oh, and the other thing that helped me remember the other thing. We're going to try to launch our Kickstarter at one of the conventions and close it at one of the conventions. And when we launched First Watch, we did a test launch of First Watch. So we set a pretty small goal on the card deck, but we did the same thing. We launched it at a convention and we closed it at a convention 30 days later. And we launched it at the Realm Makers convention, which was a literary convention, and then we closed it at a homeschool convention in Cincinnati. When we launched, we were funded in 26 minutes. Well, we had a small goal because it was a test run. We hadn't advertised, we hadn't done anything. And so and then we went so far beyond our goal, we just had to keep coming up with stretch goals. We didn't know what to do at the end of it, It's
a good problem to have.
Yeah, really.
Yes. And so, but I think for y'all, I think one of the things that we've learned from Kickstarter is you have to bring in your own audience at the start. To get any momentum to get going. And you also, you really have to have a finished product when you get there. But the thing is, other than production run, you have to have everything up to ready to go to production. Because the production timeline,
that's our thing.
The production timeline,
everything's in the can,
us,
it just hasn't been printed. Yeah.
There you go. Yeah. So for us, that timeline is about 6 months now. It was 2 months, and then it was 3 months, and now it's 6 months from the time we have a finished product and we say go. So that's, we got to have it ready to go when we finish the Kickstarter. But the Kickstarter itself is marketing. Yeah, because we have found more of our audience when we started, when we first did our Kickstarter, we started with like I said, we weren't prepared for it. It was a test run. We had an email list of 40. And after 2 Kickstarters, our email list is almost 1,000, and we're growing in this very niche market, and we got a long way to go. You really, obviously 1,000 is really the minimum you want before starting a Kickstarter. I'm sure Silverline has a much larger email list. But you will find more of your audience, I think, by going to Kickstarter, especially in the comic book. I think comics are big there and growing.
This is the first Kickstarter where I've experimented with boosting in Tumblr, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and a couple of those wouldn't take my boosts. They turned it down. I was able to boost in Tumblr and Instagram, and you are correct at this point, because I don't have huge enough following in all of my social medias to make that much of a difference. But you're correct. Right now, it's about a 1-to-1 ratio. So hopefully, we can build our audiences and that it will eventually pay off.
One approach we're taking, James, is to spend as much time paying attention to our colleagues when they launch their titles, to share on all of our shared social media and so on, and be more accountable to that, but also expanding into social media, because as creators, speaking from the artistic side, the hour heavy, the time that we have to put into creating the material, that is so comprehensive that then you go, okay, now I have to promote. So you're constantly like putting on different hats, which is part of the deal in any startup, if you're wearing multiple hats. So it's an element of discipline, and also just realizing that you have to be where the people are. So if the people are on Twitter, as much disdain as you may have for Twitter, if the people are on Twitter, you go to Twitter.
Less and less of that right now.
Right. I won't.
More Instagram, I think, is growing.
The younger audience is heading for Instagram.
Yeah. I won't do TikTok either. My background's actually countering some of that stuff in my former life. There's no way I can go on there.
No, I can't do TikTok. But that being said, it's an element of discipline and knowing that we have to have as much exposure as possible. What would you say was the breakthrough for your property in terms of turning a corner where all of a sudden you went from a modest audience to, wow, this is really working? Was there a turning point, and what was it?
Well, I wouldn't say, I think for us, as far as where our audience is now, it's not a huge turning point, but I think our first Kickstarter was that, where it was a discovery.
Sounds like it.
And so then the other point, we've grown a lot since John came on board. I was kind of floundering, and so John's been very specific about what we put up. In fact, I did not ask permission before I promoted this podcast, so I'm going to ask for forgiveness. But
always better than
all right, Joseph, enjoy the free jazz.
Free jazz on Instagram. Go for it. So see, it is reaching an audience, but in terms of, so you're saying that Kickstarter was really a big turning point, and
Kickstarter was a turning point because it brought in, and so then it brought in enough a lot of followers. Our Facebook page grew, our Instagram page grew, and so then also our Instagram rate has continued to grow steadily since then. It's not a huge, massive, but it is. So I hired way back when the Lost Property Office series came out. So the big beetle you saw on your front page
title card
episode. Yeah, so that was a steampunk beetle from the Lost Property Office from the second series. And so when that one came out, it was my first real big advance from I'd had a modest advance from a publisher, but that was my first whoa. And then we also had the short-lived movie deal with Columbia Pictures, and so I was a little spendy, and so I paid a lot of money for this social media service that was going to help us do it. And what we found out after 6 months with them is that our page following went for the James Hannibal page went to like 6,000 out of like nothing and all this stuff. Well, it was all It was all nothing. And unfortunately, Simon and Penguin are doing the same thing. Their followers are from click farms in Brazil and the Philippines and
China
and Pakistan. And so you go look at Penguin's engagement on their posts. They have 300,000 followers. Their engagement is like 5 on a post. It's sad. And Simon & Schuster, same thing. I haven't looked actually recently, but it was at least not too long ago. Whereas you go look at Enclave. Enclave is the Christian publisher of the Wolf Soldier series, and their team, and now with Oasis Media, who just bought them, is doing amazing things. It's all organic engagement, and like they just posted a thing today about a couple of books, and you know 329 likes and legit engagement, tons of comments. So yeah, they don't have 300,000 followers, but their followers are legit, and I think that's just as important as volume.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
One question about you said you opened at a convention. What sort of things did you do at the convention?
Good question.
To help promote what you were doing, that got people engaged.
Great
what
question.
Kind of
so that's a sore spot.
Well, okay,
right, we have to go red on that one. So no, what happened? One of the things that we did plan to do at that convention is we had these bookmarks made that were going to go in the bag. So we paid to have our bookmarks put in the convention bags that were handed to every attendee. Sorry. And those bags those bookmarks included a QR code that took them right to the Kickstarter. And that was a key thing. And we had sorry. We actually had the on one side we had the current Kickstarter, and on the other side we had the upcoming Kickstarter for the board game. So we were like really efficient on these things. And the post office lost them. So the bookmarks never made it. So that was one thing that we tried to do. I can't tell you how effective it was because it never materialized because they were lost.
Well, it sounds like you did have some effect. So what?
No, we did. Yeah, we actually went. It was really just talking. It was talking to folks. So one of the things we did is we brought in a projector. And so behind our booth, which you can't always do, but in our booth we had the live Kickstarter going where people could watch. So people were backing us, and boom, they'd watch their number go up. And that was part of that. Part of that energy. Yep. So we launched at a certain stage of the convention. We talked it up a whole bunch before then. It was a lot of just talking to folks. Lorehaven with the Fantastical Truth podcast was there, and they were kind enough before the convention to talk with us and talk about it. And so all of those things contributed. And then at the close, we had the bookmarks that we remade. And so John was going like person to person at that convention, handing these babies out, talking. Have you seen Lightraiders? They're over there at the Realm Makers bookstore. So Realm Makers is selling the Dragon Raid, the original vintage game, but you can talk to those guys about the new things they're doing. And they're doing a Kickstarter right now, and they're on their like 4th step goal. So stretch goal. So go talk to him. So that was, John was just a machine for 3 days of that thing.
Hey James and Dean, I'm sorry, before we wrap up, because we only have a few minutes left, I want you to tell me if I'm going to go to your website, and then it's going to click me over I've clicked the Lightraiders and it takes me over to where I can shop. If I want to buy one of your game sets, where do I start?
Okay, so we haven't launched the new version yet. Obviously, Dean hasn't finished the artwork.
Come on, Dean. Come on.
Get with it, Dean.
Jump on it right after.
Actually, he's way ahead
here.
He's way ahead of everybody else. Actually, we still have lots of maps and things, but so the good news is there. But anyway, so right now we have the vintage box sets there.
Lightraiders.com.
But we only have 19 of those left. We had 1,500 games that we put together when we first took over the intellectual and physical property. And we're down to 19 sets left of the original Dragon Raid.
Okay.
Those are, and then the rest. So we have Starlots, the board game, and that's part of the world. And then we have the First Watch card game that Joseph mentioned. And so everything works together. It's all part of the same world.
Cool.
The First Watch
Okay.
card deck is its own card game, and it also works as a Bible verse memory deck you can put on your nightstand. But it has multiple types of rules. You can play it by a card game by itself, or you can play it with dice. And then you can find these verses. Each verse has that application by Dr. Gary Huckabee on the front, a real world, and it's got that fantasy application. And so they're all that you actually see the same fantasy applications being used in the book series. So it's all part of the world, and then you'll see these verses reappear in the new game once we get it out. So that's what's available on the website right now. We don't quite have the big thing that we're doing out yet.
When is it due out? Just in a round.
We're really hoping to launch in end of April, beginning of May.
Okay, that's going to work. Joseph claims he is not a bot. He's not a bot. He's a real
Sounds
fan.
like something a bot would say.
You do look like a bot sometimes. I have to tell you, you're a little bot-esque sometimes.
He's not a click.
Am I a Cylon or am I not a Cylon?
Make him find all the pictures of the sailboat. Come on.
Exactly. Before we wrap up too, I would be remiss if I didn't mention that we still have an ongoing Kickstarter.
Yes.
Do we not?
We
Barb?
do.
We do. We have 4 days left, and we are a little over 3 days left, and we are a little bit shy of a little over $3,000. So
We're
if
closer
you've
to
been
4.
waffling
We're on the
We on
cusp,
cusp of
four.
4.
We're on the cusp.
Yeah,
We're on the
4.
other side of the top of the
Yeah.
mountain. So everybody go
Right.
check it out. It's the
And
fantastic
share
Fall Frenzy.
it. Tell all
If
your
you've
friends,
been waffling
all your
about
enemies.
about purchasing, you cannot go wrong on this Kickstarter. We've got something for everyone, and some of the most fantastic.
And you don't have to buy all of them. You can
Yeah.
pick and choose.
Yeah, you can do a la
should
carte
buy
if you
all of
want. But
Yeah,
seriously,
all or
we have
part.
got some of the most fantastic art I have seen in a long time, and you would be remiss not to at least look at the original art. We have a piece there from Mark Nelson, the legendary Mark Nelson, and it has not sold yet, and I don't know why.
Bobby's a bot.
I'm a bot though.
Bobby's a bot.
Knew it.
Bobby says I'm a bot though.
Yeah, Barb. And I to keep pushing the sales, folks. If we reach the goal, then we can get extras. So it behooves everybody who's already backed
Behooves.
it
Yeah.
to tell everybody to get us past that mark. So then there can be extra goodies. So we can unlock all the extras. But there's so much stuff right now. All the original stuff is so cool.
This thing is chock
There's so
full.
Force them, make them work. Go, when you have to create more stretch goals, then you're like, what do I do?
Every time.
If you've got that dark side of you, think of it as making them work harder and just watching them dance, monkey dance.
Exactly.
Dance for me.
Yes, and on that note, we always like to
and James, stick
up.
around.
James, stick around after we say our goodbyes. We want to thank you for your time tonight and for all the valuable information that you've shared with us. I know this is going to be one of our signature podcasts, so thank you,
It's a good one.
James, for
Thank you,
being
James.
here tonight. And
Thanks,
as we close out tonight and prepare to say goodnight to everyone, we always like to end with Make Mine.
Silverline.
I'm Pat Broderick. Make mine Silverline.